So we're going to do reassurance seeking today. I got some calming music to play in the background. And then, yeah, we're gonna have a nice little chat about how reassurance seeking behaviors actually cause problems for people and what you can do about it if somebody around you keeps engaging in reassurance seeking behaviors directed your way. Reassurance seeking can actually make your anxiety worse in the long run, even if it makes anxiety better in the short term. This is something that I have had many conversations with of late. And so I figured it would be a good topic for us to talk about today because I can do it somewhat in brief. I can make it, I think, somewhat simple. And I think it's something that's relevant to all of us. It's something to be mindful of because we all have a tendency to want to seek some level of reassurance from the people that matter to us and the people that we love. And that's great. But if you do that excessively, it is likely going to cause you problems. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you a little bit of a diagram for what it looks like to seek reassurance and why it becomes a problem. And then we're going to talk about if you are somebody who is the target of reassurance and feels like reassurance is being pulled out of you a lot from somebody or some people that you know, what you should do about that. And also what you should do instead of reassurance seeking when it becomes excessive. As always, this is not therapy. I am not your therapist. This is not therapeutic advice. This is not me telling you in any way what to do. You take this information, you do with it what you will, but I hope that you'll find it helpful in some ways because, again, I work a lot with severe and debilitating anxiety, even OCD. And OCD is somewhere where you see a ton of reassurance seeking behavior. In fact, that's the hallmark of OCD. If you're a person who engages in excessive reassurance seeking behaviors, I am not suggesting that you have OCD. If you have OCD, you generally know it because it is one of the most debilitating things that a person can experience to have OCD. I want y'all to think, as always, I like to get people involved in this. I want you to think about something, or maybe the last time that you were anxious about something. Maybe you're anxious right now. Maybe you experienced some anxiety yesterday, a week ago, or maybe if there's something that if you think a little bit about it, it has a tendency to stir up some anxiety. Okay, we all don't like experiencing anxiety. I don't know anybody who says to me, I love anxiety. I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't. I experience it. Everybody I know experiences it, but we tend not to like it. As I say a lot about anxiety, it's a risk mitigating emotion. We experience anxiety as a protector because it's often fear of the unknown. But what happens when you experience anxiety? The things that you do are going to either help make your anxiety go down, or they can make anxiety go up. And sometimes the things that make anxiety go down in the short term actually make anxiety go up in the long run. And that is part of what we're going to talk about today. Just think really quickly, like, what do I tend to do when I get anxious? And while I wait for you guys to type some stuff, I can tell you that when I experience anxiety, I have a tendency to try to stuff it and not acknowledge that I'm anxious or act in such a way that I think that I would if I was not anxious. That tends to be my go-to. So we have avoidance. Saimu, thank you very much for the sub. Distraction, overwork myself to the point of unhealthy levels, run away, isolate myself, hide from it and as many people as possible. If it gets real bad, I distract myself. Distraction, great. Okay. Distraction, it depends. I also, I used to, more so than I do now, I used to try to check in with people to see if what I was anxious about was actually real or not. These are all common, all right? So what everything you just said, nobody said anything that makes me look and go like, ooh, that's a little bit weird. Okay? So we all have our ways of trying to handle our anxiety. So the first thing that I'm going to write here is just Anxiety. Okay, so when we experience anxiety, this may look like a somewhat familiar graph because I've drawn something like this before. We experience anxiety. We have a tendency to do something. Okay. So sometimes what happens is, so our anxiety will lead to a narrative. This could also be referred to as meaning or cognition. Whatever that narrative is, regardless, there is a tendency for some of us, maybe more than we'd even like to admit, to check in with somebody or some people over and over again to make sure that we're okay, or to ease our anxiety. And so what we call this is reassurance seeking, which is essentially am I okay? Is this reasonable? Okay, etc. And the thought behind that is that that will make my anxiety go down. Because if somebody says to me, let's say I say, I'm really so let's say, for example, I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say I am experiencing some anxiety, but hold on, let me reset for a second. First thing I want to make sure I mention is that this can be recursive, meaning that like you could have some kind of thought that comes in that pulls up some anxiety. You could also experience anxiety and derive meaning from that. All right. It's a chicken and the egg thing. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, this is a recursive process. That's just good for you guys to know. Okay. So let's imagine that I'm experiencing some anxiety. I'm particularly on edge today. And let's say that I say to myself, my narrative is, nobody here cares about what I'm talking about, and nobody wants to be here. Nobody cares what I'm talking about. Everybody wants to leave. Let's say that's my narrative. Okay, so I'm anxious about my stream and how useful I'm being, and I create that meaning system, and I start asking these questions. If I was engaging in reassurance seeking behaviors, which you guys might see me do, is start asking you a lot of questions or seeking reassurance from you. So you might see me pop back and say something like, are you guys are you guys okay with this? Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay with this topic? Are you guys going to stay? Are you going to leave? Are you guys thinking about leaving right now? What do you guys think? Like, are you interested in this? Is this interesting for you guys? So I just asked that question. And what came up for you guys? So just share with me really quick. When I asked those questions right there, do you care? Are you going to leave? Is this interesting to you guys? What happened for you? What was your experience of that? Okay, so it drove you nuts. Good act. Thanks. Discomfort, it makes me uncomfortable. Okay. Annoyed. Desire to soothe. Okay. Right. And so there's no right or wrong answer to this. This is just we're going to get into some of the relational aspects of this because this is a relational endeavor. Sympathy, sadness, relation. Okay. Cool. Confused. Different people have different reactions to this. I felt bad for you. Desire to leave you. Okay. Wanting to comfort and support. Mugawara, hello? Brillin, makes me feel like you're asking me to do something more than asking how I feel. Okay, so you feel like I'm trying to pull something out of you. Okay, so right, so then Zephyr, so in that case, like it's like you're thinking about what's going on for you. That was me acting, by the way, just so you guys know. So what I just did was engaged in that was a reassurance seeking behavior. So I was experiencing anxiety about the stream. I created a narrative in my head, which was nobody's interested in me. Nobody wants to be here. And then I went in the direction of trying to ease my anxiety by asking for reassurance from all of you. So what I was looking for when I was asking those questions was basically for you guys to say something along the lines of, no, Dr. Mick, it's okay. I'm staying here. I am interested. I care about what you're talking about. That's what I was hoping for. And the thought behind this is that I get a response, okay? And that response is going to drop my anxiety if it is indeed reassuring. Okay. However, think about that for a second, what that pulled out of you. So in some way, all of you had some kind of experience that made you want to do something in response. Some of you wanted to take care of me. Some of you wanted to give me some reassurance and comfort me and probably say something along the lines of, no, this is interesting. Even if maybe you don't find it interesting, you might have been sitting there saying like, oh, well, I'm going to make sure I tell Dr. Mick that this is interesting because that'll make him feel better. Some of you who maybe found that annoying probably thought to yourselves like, oh man, like I'm going to just shut the stream off. Right? So I essentially, in that moment, when I asked you those questions and was engaging in reassurance seeking, I was outsourcing my anxiety to you. I was taking my anxiety and I was saying, here you go. And so if I was to draw that process, so here you have me with my little beanie and my headphones sitting here. And I say, hey, I'm anxious. And I basically just kamehameha'd that over to all of you who are sitting here in the crowd watching it. And I basically made my anxiety your problem. And so what I essentially asked all of you to do was just absorb it. Take it in. Because then, I get to sit here and be really happy about the fact that, like, I now feel better because you guys told me I'm good. So in the short term, if all of you said to me, okay, cool, Dr. Mick, this is fine. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. Then you're basically holding my anxiety because you're like, oh man, this guy, like he's feeling anxious. Like, all right, that's fine. I can tolerate it. I'll reassure him. I'll say, some of you were like, no, that's really freaking annoying. I'm out. Others of you are like, no, I can tolerate that. I can handle that. I'll take care of him. I'll take care of his reassurance, or I will take care of his anxiety. Now, that may be great in the short term, but Canuck, I saw what you said up there about what happens when we're not here. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. Because if you look at this from a conditioning perspective, you have actually just caused me some harm. Now, if this was the only time that I ever did this, and I looked at you guys and I was like, hey, are you guys interested in this? Are you all right with this? Are you finding it interesting? That may not be a big deal because we have a relationship. Maybe you haven't heard me ask that much in the past. And so you may look at that and be like, oh yeah, Dr. May, like, it's cool. Like, yeah, we're good. We follow you. we're great. And you may not think much of it. Now, could you imagine if I did that every single stream? If I constantly asked you, how's it going for you guys? Are you guys interested in this? Is the stream doing okay? Am I fulfilling your needs? Like, I really need to know, like if I kept doing that, you guys would be really put off by that. That's just human nature. So here's the thing. I'm gonna switch gear here for a second, and we're gonna look at this process as a act of conditioning. So what I've essentially done here, as a therapist, I'm always looking at the passive conditioning that's happening within a given sequence of interaction, which is something that we tend not to think much about. And I honestly wouldn't expect you guys to, because that's a lot of effort to do that. But when I'm sitting in a therapy room and I'm working with multiple people, I'm looking at this. Okay. So when I have my, I'm going to kind of redraw this. So when I have my anxiety and I go to my narrative, and I go outside for my reassurance, essentially to all of you. What I have essentially conditioned in doing that is that I can't handle this. I don't have the ability to reassure myself. And so what I've essentially done is created a situation in which my anxiety is reinforced if I'm alone. Because I essentially have two options. I could seek reassurance from all of you, or I could seek reassurance from myself, or both. However, if I go, what I'm essentially saying here is that if I go inside, if I choose to go inside, I am reinforcing my own anxious narrative. Does this make sense? So if I go here, if I go in this direction and I go outside, I'm reinforcing that inside does not work for me. And then let's imagine that I get a response that diminishes my anxiety. That reinforces that that was a good decision. What's happening and why this is damaging is because I'm saying, okay, I have an anxious response. Here's my narrative. That narrative could reinforce the anxiety. What I say, if I go in the direction of outsourcing it, so in reassurance seeking from others, and you give me a response that works for my anxiety and it diminishes it in the short term, I have conditioned myself essentially to keep going outside when I experience anxiety and I experience my narrative. So what do you think that's going to mean next time when I feel anxious and have a narrative about whether you guys care about the stream or not? What am I going to do? What have I conditioned myself to do? I got to go to you. Right? I'm going to seek more reassurance because I've essentially found out that if I seek reassurance from you, I'm going to feel better. It's going to help. Of course. However, what essentially is going to happen is we have to look at all of you. So let's say Mick gets anxious. He comes to us. I validate or reassure. But then I feel annoyed, bothered, etc. What's eventually going to happen is you are all going to behave in accordance with this annoyance. All right? So maybe what's going to happen is you get annoyed. You then leave. Or let's say you express your annoyance. I'm going to try not to overcomplicate this, but this is just like kind of getting inside the mind of me when I'm looking at some of this stuff. You might leave in your annoyance. What is that going to do to me? What do you think? Going to make me more anxious. I'm going to feel worse. You are essentially going to reinforce my anxiety, which means that I'm then going to create a narrative. And if the only way that I have learned that I'm going to feel better is I'm going to seek more reassurance, it's going to reinforce my anxiety. It's going to reinforce my narrative. I'm going to go outside. I might have to now seek reassurance from somewhere else. I might have to go to friends. I might have to go to family. And eventually people are going to get so overwhelmed by the fact that they have to reassure me in order for me to feel better. Relationally, it causes so many problems. People get driven nuts by this. So you guys see kind of how this works just from this standpoint of like from the relational standpoint. It's basically like I'm going to keep pursuing and I'm going to keep relying on all of you, and all of you are going to have your breaking point. Now, there is a different sequence of events that can happen here. Let's say that you validate and reassure, and then you feel fulfilled in some way. You feel good because you've helped me a lot. You've made me feel good. All right. So you feel fulfilled. You feel great about the fact that you were able to help me. And let's say that you hang around. You keep making sure that I feel better. This happens every single time. You feel fulfilled. My anxiety goes down, and that's great. But then my anxiety comes back up because next time I feel anxiety, I go outside, I outsource it, and you respond, you feel fulfilled. What we've essentially started to do is further reinforce that I have to go outside. And that also is going to create codependence. I always forget if that's an ENCE or an ANCE. It's going to create a level of codependence. Because if you derive a sense of worth from being able to help me, and maybe helping me is an avoidance of your own anxiety, we've created a codependent relationship where you get to avoid your anxiety by diminishing mine and reassuring me. And then I go to you because I feel better when I'm with you. Yikes. Right? But this could be this is how codependency can happen in the context of reassurance seeking behaviors. When I have anxiety attacks that are really bad, I usually need my fiance around me. Is that a reassurance tactic too? Not necessarily, Lexi. Not necessarily. Again, please, 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 please do not get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that reassurance is bad. I am not suggesting that needing to have the person that you love near you when you have like a panic attack is a bad thing. Absolutely not. It could be that your fiance is your secure attachment figure, Lexi, and you need that secure attachment figure in times of distress. That's okay. I'm talking about excessive reassurance seeking that then conditions at the level of relationship and conditions responses out of people in a way that makes their anxiety worse over time. Okay, so that's a really good question. How can we tell the difference between excessive reassurance seeking versus seeking healthy support? So you can usually tell the difference, Brillin, because when you, let me do it this way. You can usually tell because if you go outside and you, let's say you do not get a response. So let's say this goes to, whoop, you get no response, or this is unavailable, you will then go to self-soothing. Okay, so you can start to tell when people become overly reliant on the reassurance seeking. And so excessive is going to be when you're doing it a lot. It's going to be if the people from the old one, if they start to get annoyed with you and you still seek it regardless, if people are unavailable and you keep trying to seek reassurance from other people, that is generally excessive. There has to be a level of self-soothing that's possible within anxiety, or else you're constantly going to make your anxiety everybody else's problem. And people have different levels of tolerance for that. And there's some people that you can take advantage of in that space. And then there's other people that will set boundaries, but those boundaries, if you go outside, those boundaries will potentially cause you more distress, because if it's been conditioned that if I go outside, I feel better. If I go inside, I don't. And then I have people that set boundaries that set me inside. It's going to jack my anxiety. It's going to send me more into a narrative spiral. And I'm going to try to keep going outside because my distress is going up because I've been forced to go inside. I hope that makes sense. Reason I keep reassurance seeking is the self-hatred, because if I seek internal validation about 100% of the time, I'll diss on myself. But if I seek outside reassurance, at least I have a chance of hearing nice things. Right. So that's the thing. That's when we're getting into this conditioning response here, Jinx, of, what the hell is this? Go away. Okay. Of basically what is it that is being reinforced? So I'm just going to draw this again. Okay. Can you guys actually read this? All right, Zephyr, have a good one. Okay. So let's expand upon this a little bit just to help really make sense of this for all of you. So let's say, so you have anxiety and you have the narrative. Now, I'm going to make the argument that your anxiety is not something that you can necessarily change in the short term, all right? Like, you experience anxiety regardless, and that's okay. As I always say, it's okay to experience anxiety. So you go for outside reassurance. Now, this will either reduce, well, let's say you seek. Okay. And let's say you receive. I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. Take a look at the help section or Alexa. Did you guys hear that? What's up, Lemon? So if you get reassurance from the outside, it's going to reinforce itself. It's basically going to say, like, yep, you should do that. That was a good idea. That's exactly what we should do. Okay, but when you seek outside reinforcement and this works, you have conditioned that this does not. What also happens conversely is if you seek... All right, hold on. Okay, so it can be reassuring or it can be not reassuring. Same thing can happen here. Okay. So what we do here is if you seek self-soothing, this looks ridiculous. Okay. So if you self-soothe and it's reassuring, that might reinforce that, Like, that basically reinforces that you're self-soothing. If you self-soothe, if you attempt to self-soothe and it does not work, what that's going to do is it's going to basically punish you from doing this. So if this doesn't work, whoop, it's a punishment. Same thing here. If I go to others and it doesn't work, that's a punishment. If I go outside and it works, that's a reward. And if I go inside and it works, that's a reward. But ultimately, what's happening is we're doing this to try to lessen our anxiety, but going this route and seeking outside assurance and this working is promoting a level of avoidance from our own ability to sit inside. Being able to self-soothe happens, like, a mediator of this is your ability to sit within distress tolerance. Because if you seek outside really fast, that is generally going to be a quicker dose of anxiety mitigation than it is to sit with yourself, particularly up front. So, Jinx, when you said, if I seek out reassurance from myself, all I say are nasty things, then what that would essentially do is reinforce that you should absolutely not go inside. And if not just you, but anybody in that situation, what I'd be working on as the therapist is how to build up a level of narrative where this can be reassuring, because this is kind of the ideal pathway within all of this. Is I get anxious, I have a narrative about it, I'm able to self-soothe, reassure, I gain some level of reassurance, and then what you might do is either seek some level of confirmation from the outside, or it just may make it easier to hear whatever somebody else is saying. So if I bought a sweater and I really love the sweater and I have my convictions about it, but I'm really, like, my own reassurance on all the work that or my hat. Let's say my hat. I bought this hat. I really love this hat. Okay. I bought this hat. I did all my research. I tried to figure out what hat I wanted. I made the purchase. I feel really good about it. I like my hat. I'm strong in my convictions. But let's say that it's important to me that I have reassurance from everybody else to really confirm that this was the right decision. Let's say, despite the fact that I really like the hat, I am a little bit anxious about how you guys feel about me wearing it on stream. Like, I don't know, does this change the way you guys see me? Does this hurt the Dr. Mick image? It's not the typical hat I kind of wear, right? We start to get in some anxiety. So let's say I ask you guys, what do you think about my hat? That's a reasonable question. If I am overly reliant, if it has been conditioned that I need your approval, that I need your reassurance to make me feel better about the anxiety I'm experiencing about my hat, and let's say all of you said, I really do not like your hat. I'm not into it. I'm not into it. It's not great. It looks a little bit weird. Like, I'd really rather you didn't wear it. Why did you buy that? Now, that's not been reassuring, right? And that is actually reinforcing my narrative that maybe they don't like it. And I'm desperately needing reassurance for my original conviction that this is a hat that I really like. And I may start to doubt myself. I may start to doubt those convictions because I have become overly reliant upon the feedback of others in order to create my narrative. Whereas if I do feel somewhat strong in my convictions, I may have reassured myself, you know what? I'm curious how all of you think about it. I'm curious what you guys think about the fact that I wore a knit hat on stream tonight, but that makes sense. Of course I'm anxious about it, but that's okay. It's all right for me to be anxious about it. They may like it, they may not, but I like it. And that's pretty cool that I like it and that I decided to wear it and I'm interested in what people have to say about it. That's reassuring to me so that I'm ready to handle whatever it is that or I may not even ask you. I mean, I didn't send you guys a message before I came on today and say like, hey, would you guys be cool? Like if I wore a knit hat on stream? I didn't seek your reassurance for that. I just showed up in a knit hat. And it just so happened that a lot of you said, I like your hat, which is pretty cool. I mean, it reinforces that that was a good idea for me. But I already went on stream thinking like, yeah, I'm just going to wear this hat. But if I was excessively engaging in reassurance with you, it would really harm my relationship with you guys. It would either make a relationship where people get overly sucked into having to make sure that I'm okay and they start to feel responsible for my well-being. And that can create either a codependent relationship or it can cause people to be driven away. Yes, it is snowing here. Yes, those are whiteout clouds. It absolutely sucks. It's accumulating and I hate it. So in the long run, what happens, and Canuck, I think this is going to start to address what you had asked earlier. In the long run, what this does is it shows me that I'm not capable of reassuring myself, that I'm not capable of self-soothing, that I need other people in order to make me feel better, which also reinforces for me that I'm not capable of handling my own anxiety. It tells me that the only way that I can make my anxiety go down is if other people help me. And I become overly reliant upon it. And it also reinforces that anxiety is just this big, huge thing that cannot be tackled. And so if I start to avoid my anxiety and avoid the accountability I have for my emotional experience by outsourcing it to other people, I have now started to engage in an avoidance-seeking behavior by seeking reassurance. And that makes anxiety grow over time because it's not being attended to. It essentially reinforces this entire process of reassurance seeking, reinforces that anxiety is big and unmanageable. And I can't handle it. And we don't want that. You want to be able to reassure yourself to some extent, be able to be mindful about your emotional experience and be able to kind of operate within it and make healthy decisions about what to do when you're anxious. And in this sequence of events, you don't have choice here. So I'm going to show this. I'm going to represent it this way. You don't have choice here, so get out of here. You do have some level of choice and agency over the narrative that you build and over the behavior that you engage in. And the other thing is, and this is the other tough part, is if you engage in reassurance seeking behaviors, you don't have control over what happens. You don't have control over the response. I can seek your reassurance and that's fleeting. And that's the other thing that people don't understand when they overly engage in reassurance seeking behaviors is that people's ability to reassure you is so fleeting. You have no control over that. So that becomes anxiety provoking in and of itself because you don't get a consistent response from other people because they have their own shit going on. There are some days where I could be the most reassuring person in the world to all of you. And then there are other days where I might have so much shit going on that I just can't do it. I just can't be here in that way. I can't help you in that way. And so if you are a person who's become overly reliant on people helping you through your anxiety and being the source of reassurance for you, and then they become unavailable, it's going to jack your anxiety even more because you haven't learned how to engage in a level of self-soothing. You haven't been able to see it as a choice of whether you're going to go seek reassurance from the other or engage in self-soothing or both. And that's such an important point. Like if there's nothing else you remember from me today, it's that. Can internal reassurance ever be a negative thing? I find with my OCD, constantly reassuring myself on things also reinforces. Is it the same thing? Well, self-reassurance, I think, becomes a negative thing if it can become narcissistic in some ways where our own reassurance is the only thing that we can use. Because that basically there's an over-reliance on our own narrative, and if we start to instill doubts, it may actually make it hard in the long run to receive reassurance from others, because there are times where maybe we don't know. Maybe there's times where we do need reassurance. In the case of the medication example I gave earlier, right? I don't know what's supposed to happen with the medication that I'm taking. I wasn't trained in that. I don't have the expertise. I don't know how my thumb is supposed to heal if I broke it. So I do need to be able to engage in some level of reassurance from an expert who knows what they're talking about. if I think that my own reassurance of like, my thumb's fine, it feels fine, and if it feels fine, it must be fine, I may do further damage to my thumb because I'm engaging in a level of self-reassurance that may be misguided, right? So that's where this is such a complex thing of, it's okay to accept outside influence and to seek some level of reassurance. It's why I say it's not bad. It's when we engage in excessively in reassurance seeking behaviors, to some extent with others or ourselves, where it starts to have consequences that are unforeseen. Being overly reassurance seeking with other people means you're going to damage your relationships or create codependent relationships, and it's going to reinforce that you can't handle your anxiety. If you overdo it in terms of self-reassurance, it may make it hard to receive influence and feedback from others who may have something very important to say. This is the kind of person who goes into the doctor's office and fights with the doctor about what the doctor has said, even though that doctor may be world-renowned for what the hell they're talking about. Like, that's a consequence also of that. But this drives people away. And as you can see, when a person engages in reassurance seeking behavior and you set boundaries to push them away, it often makes things worse because they come back with a vengeance of trying to be engage in even more reassurance seeking. And there's really, it's never enough, or there's the hyper reliance, and that tends to make people feel icky. It makes people feel like they're responsible for your emotional experience. And we have to, all of us, every single one of us sitting here, watching the VOD, me included, everybody in that building that you can see behind me, we are all responsible for our own emotional experience. My emotional experience is not somebody else's responsibility. It's something that I have to take accountability for. I am sad, and therefore it's okay if I need to share that with you, but I cannot make necessarily my sadness your problem. This is also sometimes where you see people get hung up on needing to be apologized to. Now, I get it, okay? Like, if people wrong you, it's common courtesy for them to apologize and all these sorts of things. But there are some people that just get so hung up on being wronged that they get consumed by it because they aren't getting the reassurance that they're wanting from the person. And that person could be in the right or whatever. And you see a whole bunch of damage get done as the result of that. It's okay to be a reassuring person. Don't get me wrong. The thing that I would caution those of you who find yourselves being reassuring to others is you need to recognize what boundaries that you want to have so that you are not overly pulled in. And if you start to recognize that people are overly paying attention to your reassurance as a way to live their life and live comfortably, you may consider removing yourself from that in some way if you are of the mind that people are responsible for their own well-being, or at least people are responsible for taking some accountability. It's okay if you're like, say you're in a position where you need some extra reassurance, it's okay to be reflexive about that. Hey, I know I'm being really demanding right now. I know that this is really tough, and I know that I keep asking for your support, and it's really meaningful to me. Thank you. I recognize that at some point I'm going to have to be able to talk myself down from this. That's healthy. But going on and on and on about like, I need you, you have to, I have to, is a really damaging place to be. And that's where you start to see OCD come out. OCD is just littered with reassurance seeking behaviors. When you go to check to make sure that the door is locked 30 times, that's you having an anxious experience about the door being locked and maybe a sense of safety. And every time you go to look at that lock, to see that it's locked, you have engaged in a reassurance seeking behavior. But if you can't internalize that reassurance, or if you've become hyper reliant on that reassurance, you're going to keep checking the lock every single time you are anxious about whether you lock the door. And that's where you see, when that goes off the rails, a person constantly getting up and checking the lock. And it's just absolutely debilitating. Okay, if you get anxious about whether the oven's on, you're essentially trying to mitigate your anxiety by going over and checking the oven. But then if you experience the anxiety again, and even though you know you checked the oven, if you don't have the ability to engage in a level of distress tolerance around that and self-soothe around that and talk yourself through that, you're going to get up and you're going to go check the oven again. And every single therapist worth their salt is going to tell you that is damaging. That is reinforcing over time that the oven is off for so long as you're not looking at it. So you have an emotional experience. This doesn't just have to say anxiety. This could say anything. Okay, but self-soothing is having an emotional experience. I'm actually going to erase that and put emotional experience. Okay, is an emotional experience. It's acknowledgement of the emotional experience. Just what it is. Okay, think of it as the facts. I feel anxious. I feel sad. Okay, then it's our ability to produce a narrative that is curious and compassionate. Okay. I wonder why. What might this be because of? What's the purpose that this is serving? It's okay that I'm anxious. It's okay that I'm sad. Okay. And then it's an action. That action being something that will basically be in the spirit of health. Like in the spirit of this level of acknowledgement and the curiosity and the compassion. So making the decision to either go for a walk, to do the thing that you're going to do, to not do the thing that you're going to do, that you were thinking about doing, to seek some level of reassurance from somebody else, to whatever it might be. Okay. But that's generally like the way that I look at self-soothing is this. Okay. And what it is also kind of underneath all of this is the ability to build distress tolerance. So through this, you're basically sitting with the discomfort. So the long story short is when you experience anxiety, you have the thoughts, avoiding or seeking reassurance is going to cause short-term relief, but it has a long-term consequence in terms of the way that your relationship with the thing that has stirred up the anxiety, that long-term consequence is that it has been reinforced that you are not capable of handling it without the assistance of others, and therefore it conditions the perceived power that the thing has.